Hi, it's José Eduardo.
Hi, Nicoletta.
So I'm so excited for us to connect and have this like tea over Zoom, this conversation about our fellowship. So I guess before we get started, you want to like formally introduce yourself, your name that you want us to kind of land on. Okay.
Yeah. Hi, my name is José Eduardo. I'm a language worker and cultural organizer, artist, based out of here in Houston, Texas.
I'm so excited. And so I am Nicoletta de la Brown. I am an artist. I am based in Baltimore. And so, yeah, I'm excited to talk about our experience in the fellowship. Okay. So it was really lovely that we talked about how we were going to kind of bring this together, this conversation. So I would love if you, because since you came up with these beautiful starter seed conversation pieces, if you wanted to jump in and start with the first one and we'll go from there.
Yes. So the first one I believe was what we um, what we actually experienced through the fellowship, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I'll post these three questions at the offset, just so they can be in the air. But yeah, what our experience was throughout the year in the fellowship, what we had planned to do, like some of before. So many changes, so many so many things change in our lives, and I think in the world. And then we also wanted to share, what's next for us, because we're, I think that this, and we both talked about this, right? Like this fellowship is just a starting point, for not just for our work and the continuation of our practice, but also for our connection and our relationship moving forward. So yeah, that's yeah, it's kind of like the three questions that we wanted to put out there.
Yes. So do you want me to start with the first one and we can roll in since you
Yeah,
asked
yeah,
the
yeah.
beautiful question?
Yeah, I would love that. Yes.
So for me, like when I first connected with you during our first, like when I flew out to Houston and then I was there and we were doing our kind of opening welcome to everyone, like basically inviting everyone into our practice and our kind of guiding questions for the fellowship, I was really moved by your presentation. I told you, and I'll say it over and over again, you changed the way I looked at food, you changed the way I looked at language. Part of what I was really excited about was that we spoke a lot of the same languages in our art practices. We both were looking at ritual, we were looking at like spaces that were safe, spaces that were inviting, spaces of, what we do when we're gathering, like why and how we gather.
Mhm.
And it really made me rethink how I gather. So just off of the bat, after your presentation, I completely changed the way that I met with people. Formal meetings no longer were around food at all. I realized that that was a boundary that I wanted to hold for myself as a safe space. When I'm nourishing my body, I should also be thinking about how the environment, my peers or whoever's with me, colleagues or friends, how that's nourishing me, and I need to hold that space for that to be what it is. So I really want to thank you for that initial kind of seed you planted that completely reshaped my practice, my ritual practice and my art practice. And it really was like led into my guiding questions. Like my thought process was that we were going to be interacting a lot, maybe going to eat at places. You would show me some places that I should really take time in Houston, and also maybe develop some rituals that we could share with each other. Because my practice is very centered, much centered around plant medicine and tea,
Mhm.
and I wanted to learn from you and see what you were doing as ritual. And so that was part of the thing that I was really excited about. So that's the first, yeah, that's my beginning answer.
And thank you for that. I love hearing that, because I got the pleasure of actually watching your presentation first, that first day that we met, and I still remember the physical feel, like something that actually stuck with me was the physical feeling of witnessing you in front and in embodying, right? And I, again, like it goes back to the physical for me, like embodying this particular energy, this particular spirit that was both inviting, but was so clear, was so assertive, was so present, and that to me kind of was the introduction to connecting with your practice. And I also think a lot about the day after, I believe, or one of the conversations we had after, which was at Doshi House, where we walked from Project Row houses to Doshi House. We were sitting outside, and again, I think that was our first tea conversation outside in the patio, and I think for me, this is something that came up also throughout the year, right? And we talked about this a little bit, even though we weren't checking in, like every week or talking explicitly about the ongoing projects. I think for me, this idea of bringing embodiment more intentionally and thoughtfully into my practice was something that stuck throughout. I think that again, the physical elements of my practice, I think, not that they were an afterthought, but they were part of, right? They were a component, they were part of a whole. But I just feel like being able to be present, even just as you were saying, right, in my daily life, in my conversations with my family and friends, in my meetings, I think that connecting the embodiment practice to my artistic practice was something that actually was really fulfilling throughout the year. And that's something that I appreciate you for, for welcoming me into and for helping guide me through that.
Thank you. That makes my that makes my heart so happy because I really feel like I gained a friend immediately. Like I now see you as more like family. It's like you're a part of my art family. I definitely feel that this is a safe space. So one thing that I want to say thank you is for being so inviting. Your spirit is so warm and so open, and that it's so nourishing. So that was one of the things that I was kind of, if I was completely transparent, was sad about with COVID happening during the beginning of,
Yeah.
we met one time and then I flew back home and then I had plans. I actually had my tickets purchased and was coming back out to Houston and everything was frozen. Like everything came to a screeching halt. The world stopped.
Yeah.
And so part of me was then, you and I were talking about this a little bit. We then had to reset, like, what does it mean to be a fellow when you can't practice the social engagement that is so kind of crucial or critical or like a core component of our practices? It's being in public space, it's connecting with others, it's listening, it's engaging. And for both of us, it's about connection. So the disconnect was something that was very much something I had to fully process. And at times I didn't know how. Like, I'll be completely honest. Art is my first language and ritual is what I do. And so I was like, how do I stay present? How can I be kind? And how can I continue my research? Because the questions that I was asking were not just about like a project, they were more about my practice. How do I show up as the best version of myself? How do I honor my culture, my heritage? How do I make sure that it stays an embodied practice where it's nourishing me as much as I'm giving to the world? And so I think that that was like an interesting part of the beginning of my conversation. So I would love to hear like what that moment was for you. Like when we realized that we weren't going to be able to gather or even do this the way it was intended or way we wanted to, kind of with intention, then those thought processes, and then we can talk about what we did.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. I think the first realization, or the first thing that hit me was was our connection, the two of us not being able to continue to see each other physically. I think that piece was sort of the first thing that dropped, and I had to come to terms with it, because part of my my desire and my excitement about this fellowship was really this, this the connection, collaboration with the other fellow, and obviously processing that, understanding that. To be honest, I think I was a bit, it took me a little bit longer to realize that even though I was physically in Houston, there were still going to be a lot of changes. I think I was perhaps a little too hopeful, or saying, well, I'm here. I will figure it out. I will, try to do things um, social distance or virtually, or find other modes. But I think one of the things that I really had to learn, and this was really difficult for me as well, was that it's not enough just to replace something, right? It's not enough just to replace the in-person meeting with, let's bring someone else into Zoom or a phone call. But if our entire world is changing, there's something that needs to happen beyond just the replacement. And I think for me, that was probably the most difficult part. Well, I am 15 minutes away from Doshi House. I'm 15 minutes away from Alfredo Soul Food. I could just show up. I could just go and make those connections. But because the world was changing, that context was also changing, and I had to honor that, for not just for myself, but also for the folks that I was hoping to be in community with, hoping to be in connection with, noticing, that the space that needed to happen, right? Adjusting to the connections that we could, but also allowing that space for things to be as they were, instead of immediately trying to replace, immediately trying to shift into how else can I do this. And that to me was difficult, again, because I felt so physically close, but emotionally and spiritually, there was still that distance that I needed to honor first.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And it totally, like, I feel it. Like, I feel that we were totally in the same, like in the same lane as we were processing. I was literally saying, I have to process, because there was like a little bit of a warning. Like, I was
Yeah.
sad that I couldn't travel. Like, I understood why, but I still was letting my body understand, you cannot go to third ward. I had these memories of being there and walking around for hours and talking to people and having people tell me stories. And that was really powerful. And I reminded myself that it's okay, that I can like sit with those memories and remind myself of what I wanted to do. And it's okay for me to pivot. I think that that's a lovely thing that we can really take from this moment. One thing I've learned during COVID is that we really need to like slow down and look at what is really the most important thing to do. And art is who we are. We can't, like, you and I can't not be artists. It's our language. It's like
Mhm.
how we exist in the world. And so it's also okay for us to know that we can pause and pivot and process. And so if you don't mind, I'd love to share my way of processing after I got through the first like phase of like, what is this? Because we were all like, for a second, we were like, oh, is it a week? Is it 2 weeks? Is it a month? No. And then it got, this is going to be some kind of normal. This is some process that we have to kind of get accustomed to. So the first thing that I did, I reminded myself of my questions. It was like, who heals the healers? Like, what if safe space was all space? Like these conversations I was having as a shamana, as a shaman, as an artist, part of what I'm doing as a creative is showing up in the world authentically and vulnerably on purpose. But I'm also wanting to remind myself that I have to hold space and take care of myself. And when are we doing that? It was more, the question was like, when and how is that happening? And I wanted to explore that through research. So this was perfect timing. I mean, I honestly gave myself permission to just feel. And because I'm a creative and because I sculpt space with my body, because movement is a part of my practice, the first thing I did was I set up a camera and I just moved. I allowed my emotions to come out of my body. I didn't have language. I didn't know what to say. Sometimes I was crying, sometimes I was angry, sometimes I was scared, sometimes I was joyous. And what I did was I set up a camera and I let my body inform me, my spirit inform me of what kind of was going on. And I did that as just research. Like I literally was like, let me look back. I honestly did it and thought to myself, if I'm feeling joy, what does that look like? Like if I look at it, it wasn't intended for anyone else at first, it was just for me. But then when I looked at them, they were kind of poetic. They became really like these beautiful moments that I felt like I could share with others as just a, it's almost like a sketchbook. It was like, this was my sketch in real time, in real space. So that was my process. I called them movement response journals. And then I started to put them together to look at them like in conversation with themselves. So I'm excited about that being birthed as just a part of my research. So I just wanted to share that as
Yeah.
basically the main way that I was processing.
Yeah, I love that you called it like a poetic, almost like poetic movement or like a poetic embodiment too, because I, you know, the thousands of miles away that we were physically, I found myself responding in a very similar way, but in a different dimension that I personally hadn't explored as much. And I found myself turning to pen and paper, which to me felt, and you know, as someone who's worked in interpretation, translation work, someone who's you know who uses language in different, I would say, languages, right? Not just written and spoken, but you know, heard and seen languages. I found that going back to pen and paper was actually something that um, that I had forgotten about, and I went back to pen and paper to start writing, right? To start writing, as you're saying, kind of that processing, almost like you know, a more direct journal. But I found that writing for me had a similar impact, right? For me, it was initially, let me use writing to process, because I usually find myself working with other people's languages, with other people's writing, and I thought, let me write for me, let me write to articulate what is in my body, what is in my mind, what is in my heart. And I found that the words, as they were coming up on paper, um, started taking up their own lives, started, you know, started taking off beyond the page. And I think that for me was probably one of the you know, walking away from the fellowship, one of the biggest realizations, that the the idea of working with language internally, the idea of writing as a way to process, doesn't just have to be for me um, a way to create. It doesn't always have to be for an end product. It doesn't always have to be for a specific project or piece or publication. The writing itself can be the space, right? The space that holds me and others. and and yeah, like you said, it kind of just became a thing that, as with any practice, right, you do over and over again, it starts changing, transforming, evolving, and then taking root in other parts of your being. And I found that for me, again, with writing. And another thing that I found really exciting was that I was able to move from just the individual personal writing to writing collaboratively and collectively. I was really fortunate, and this is a space that I want to, you know, this is a group that I want to bring into the space, and a space that I want to uplift, because it was really nourishing and powerful for me. But I was lucky to work with a couple of friends, some longtime friends, and actually some friends that became strong, you know, friends through the process. But we created a space called Writing Against Oblivion, where we would, you know, meet every week. We started meeting weekly, then bi-weekly, and then, you know, kind of change it back and forth, where we came together and we, yeah, we wrote. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we gossiped, sometimes we just held space for each other, sometimes we sat, you know, trying to see each other through screens. But this idea of writing against oblivion came up over and over again throughout the year. And it really, like I said, I want to uplift those folks in that group of people in that space, because I think it also helped me not just to process, but to hold myself as all the changes happen, right? As you're saying, at first, is it a week? Is it a month? You know, I think those changes were for me easier, and maybe not easier, but I was able to more intentionally and thoughtfully deal with that because of these different spaces that were holding me.
I love that so much. You talked about practicing, and like we both fall back into ritual. Like that's the one thing I'm hearing. It's like,
Yeah.
how do we go back into the rituals that support us, and how do we build new ones? So you just shared that you built a new practice around gathering, and it was through this like writing, this language, this communicating with self, and then sharing that with others in the community, right? It was this gathering of like-minded individuals that could feel like you're all nourishing yourselves and each other at the same time. And that's beautiful. It's really like what we were talking about before. Like we both were talking about gathering. And I think that part of what happened is that I know, and I'm hearing from you, that you also found new ways to gather. So
Yeah.
I wanted to make these screens, like for me, less of like this technology and pierce through the ether. Like my purpose during times when I was able to connect was, how do I make you feel like I'm hugging you? How do I feel like I can still hold your hand even though we're through a screen and thousands of miles away. So I also did these kind of gatherings that were tea rituals over, through Zoom, through technology. And it was something that made me feel like, okay, even though I can't hug this person that I love, I can still, have a cup of tea and have some kind of connection. And there wasn't a lot of like guidelines. It wasn't, this is the objective. It really was about the connection and the space. Like you said, hold space, right? Sometimes it's laughing. Sometimes, like you said, you're gossiping, whatever it is, it's like, that was a part of it. And I think that that was beautiful and something that I really got to, as a lovely takeaway from this moment is like, I'm going to keep that. Like these gatherings, I'm going to keep. I'm going to keep my practice of documenting when I'm responding to life through video. I'm also thinking about how now that we soon will, in the like post-vaccine world, post-vac, we'll be able to gather in spaces, but also thinking about how does my performance practice show up cinematically in video and film? How does gathering still feel safe, right? Because I don't know that I want to get very close to people. I don't know when that will happen, but how do we still do that? So I guess I'm excited about hearing from you what you think could be next, in general.
Yeah, I that just makes me think again, right? This idea of that I think came up a lot in my research, this idea of not just replacing but transforming, right? I think the initial reaction that I experienced was we were replacing a physical gathering for a Zoom or whatever other form, right? We're replacing a space, a physical space with a virtual screen. And what I'm hearing you talk about and what you were doing through these rituals, through these gatherings, is actually transforming the way that we gather, not just replacing one medium or one space for another, but transforming the way that we gather. And that to me is so beautiful, because I think that came up so often throughout the year. And I think that that's something that I'm taking with me, I'm holding on to rather, in this post-vaccine world, in that, again, that kept coming back from you, right? That kept coming back from you as I was processing this, right? I think this pandemic helped me rethink what it means to to be safe, right? With someone. It helped me rethink what healing looks like. It helped me rethink where and how my energy and my spirit needs to be held, and when it wants to hold others. And I think it goes way beyond a virus. It is way beyond a virus. And we were joking about this. There's the vaccine dealt with the virus. It doesn't deal with all these other components, right, that we are constantly navigating. And I think this pandemic, and not just with the virus, but all of the popular uprisings, all of the coalescing around supporting Black lives and Black futures, all the work around connecting to our indigenous siblings and land, and that to me brings up so many other components that were always there, but are just so vividly now part of how I want to be in this world, that to me that makes me really hopeful for the future, not just of my practice, but for the future of our communities, right? And so, yeah, I think for me that continuing to rethink what that safety, what that healing, what that holding space looks like beyond the virus, to me is really important. I think that I'm still, that's going to be an ongoing process, but yeah, I'm curious for you what that what are some things that are brewing up, or what are some
Yeah.
the reflections?
Yeah, I'm so excited to share. So thank you for asking. And thank you for sharing. I'm so excited. So one thing that I look forward to is coming back to Houston. Like, I definitely want to come back to Third Ward. I was so moved when I was on the footprint, when I was in front of the shotgun homes, when I was there at Project Row Houses. Those spaces are so special. And Third Ward is so special that I can't wait till I can come back and spend some time. What that looks like yet, I don't know. I definitely would love to collaborate with you. In my mind, there would be some kind of ritual that would be, as gifted in some way to a group, to the community, to Third Ward, to Project Row Houses, as a thank you. As an artist, it's like, that's what I can give. I can give my practice, I can give ritual. So, like I said, I don't know what that looks like, but I love the idea of coming back when it's safe to travel, when it actually makes sense to gather, and when that would feel like a good fit for all of the people involved, because I want to be able to give back. I'm also excited about potentially, I would love if there was an opportunity to activate, the homes, right? Those beautiful shotgun homes, those beautiful little structures, right? They are essentially tiny art galleries. There's activation spaces. And so in my mind, I don't know if you thought about that, but I would love to, this is my dream. I will paint my picture. You and I would each have one, and maybe they would be next to each other, and somehow they would have a conversation. It's like the year that didn't happen, almost like honoring the things that did not happen, but also honoring what did happen. And that's real. I think that part of what I want to make sure that I'm saying out loud is how this fellowship changed my life. And I mean that, and I'll explain it, because it gave me the space to just breathe. It reminded me of those questions were my guiding questions that became my guiding questions for life, and not just the fellowship. It reminded me to slow down and also put up very secure, specific boundaries around what is my core belief, what are my values, what aligns with who I am. And that was like so important to me. Going into COVID, I believe it really helped me feel like I'm not alone. José Eduardo is doing this. Nicoletta is doing this. Like, we're trying to figure this out. But I felt like I wasn't alone. And the things that I was given by the resources through the fellowship helped me feel like I could get through this, if I'm completely honest. And so post this, I do want to come back and have some kind of capstone, convocation, some kind of moment that is a gift back, because I feel like I did get so much, even though I couldn't physically be there.
Yeah, thank you. I really feel that. Again, I'm trying to be really mindful of how my body is at this present moment, and I'm, again, that reverberation is, that's what comes to my mind, right? I feel reverberation. I feel my body reverberating with what you just shared. I think that you know, you mentioned this at the beginning. There's this component of mourning, right? Of mourning, and grief, even throughout this, um, throughout the past year. And I think in for so many different reasons, in so many different ways. And I have learned, I think, over the past year to, as you were saying, right, to honor that grief, to honor that mourning. That is part of the practice. That has become part of the practice. And I think, um, again, I see the world around me, and there's this urgency for, you know, going back to normal, or getting back outside, or doing all of these things. And I stopped to ask myself, you know, what is it that, you know, what is it that we're mourning, right? That that we've forgotten about. What is it that we were mourning at the beginning of this that we've forgotten about? What is that grief that still remains? And I feel that, personally, I feel this sense of collective grief that still exists, that me, you know, in my opinion, it's not being honored. It's not giving this, it's not being given the space and time that it deserves, because of what it means for all of us. And so when I hear you share that idea of what, you know, what us coalescing for an activation, like I definitely want to honor that. I definitely want to incorporate that as part of, you know, whatever it is that we come together to do. And you know, this is a story I don't know if I've shared before, but again, you know, a few months into the pandemic, there was this feeling that, unfortunately, you know, I felt, I was feeling those feelings of guilt and disappointment, right? Like, well, I'm not doing enough. I'm not being enough. I'm letting down the fellowship. I'm letting down the third world community. I'm letting down Nicoletta, Sixto, Sydney. And I would drive to third ward, and this was still when many of the restaurants were shut down, and I would just walk up to the restaurant and just be there physically. There was no one there that I could talk to or have a conversation with. Everything was closed. The kitchen was completely silent, which is, you know, not something that it's very eerie for me to be in a silent kitchen. Kitchens to me are just, you know, they're stages. They are, always alive and performing. And I just, yeah, I just visited, and sometimes I recorded whatever was out there, whatever sounds, um, were out there, whether it was from the traffic, from birds, from, you know, from me just walking on the parking lot, concrete. And that, and again, I brought those feelings of guilt and shame, and I let them go, right? And I let them go, and I was able to just be in those moments. And so I think for me, that, those instances, that silence and those sounds, those, you know, those moments of doubt are also some things that I want to honor, and are also things that, um, again, that are really, really beautiful and powerful things that have taught me, right, out of this fellowship. So yeah, I would love to uplift that or incorporate that in some way. But I think, yeah, I think there is just so there this connection in this relationship is feels so there's so much that's coming next in ways that I can't even imagine, in ways that I can't even articulate right now. And I'm really, really grateful for that. So both to you,
Yeah.
Nicoletta, but to this fellowship as well for making that possible.
Wow. Like I definitely felt it in my whole being. Like you said, that kind of reverberation, I felt it. I want to say that one thing that came up for me when you were speaking, as you were talking about like the stage of a kitchen, right? It is a stage, it's a space for performance and it's a space for nourishing. I reminded myself of the fact that as a Black Latinx woman, as a Panamanian, as a person of color, often the world tells me that I'm valuable when I'm doing for others. Like, and I had that whole moment of I can't do anything for anybody else. Do I still exist? Do I still have value? Am I still able to, am I still here? And that was something that I think all of this, the world slowing down, actually gave me space to take care of myself in a way that I couldn't have asked for. Like I could have slowed the world down if I wanted to, but this giant pause button created that space. And it reminded me, and this is still an ongoing conversation of like, as a person of color, as a Black woman, as a Black Latina, as all these things, as a Panamanian, do I still have value if I am just nourishing myself? Do I still have value if my art is not ready to be birthed to the world yet? Can I take time to really put in the energy, but also allow it to flow over me? Like allow it to be gifted to me first, and then I can give it out. So I think that you just reminded me of something that I want to meditate on and think about, because it was a gift that was given. I can't speak, I don't want to speak for you and say it was given to you, but I definitely think that this was given to me because I couldn't do anything if I wanted to. Like you said, that kitchen was closed.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing we couldn't do. I couldn't do it. So then it reminded me of like, what can I do and who am I? I have to take care of me, because when the world does allow me to give more, I have to be whole first. So thank you for that. This has been such a nourishing, beautiful conversation. I know we're going to probably wrap it up here because I know we'll have a conversation with Sixto and Sydney. But just thank you for being my friend. Thank you for being like family. I can't wait to see what we do next. I can't wait to see what you do next. And I also can't wait to see what's created when we come back together and are able to like birth something from all of this, all these seeds we've been planting over this year. There'll be a harvest soon, and I'm excited.
Yeah, no, I echo all of that. I think that to me, this was in some ways unimaginable, but I am sitting in that gratitude, sitting in that, basking in that, really basking in this that we have put forth, that we have given each other. And again, thank you. Yeah, I am excited for us to come back together. I the sounds, the sense, the feelings, the ways that the world will move. I think when we are finally able to connect again, yeah, it's unimaginable, and I love that right now. I love that.
Oh, okay. I'm so excited. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop the recording and then we can keep talking a little bit.